These are the quarterbacks that you need to be making trades for or trading away based on where we have them in the rankings. Dave Kluge and I, we are going to be giving you our Dynasty quarterback rankings, break them down by tiers. And honestly, this is the easiest way to find out where you can get value on the Dynasty trade markets and honestly, where you might still be holding the bag. And Dave, this is a fun exercise because we don't have too much that we disagree on here, but I think we're going to find some really good gems in the Dynasty trade market.
Yeah, I think there's a handful of players that we'll talk about that we disagree on, but when you start ranking these guys, they do kind of fall naturally into place. And I think this is probably the most important ranking episode we've done. I think in redraft, you're okay just kicking quarterbacks down the road, and you can draft two guys in rounds 17 and 18 and kind of patchwork your quarterback room there. But in Dynasty, especially with the rise of super flex leagues now, quarterbacks really rule the landscape. And I've been doing a lot of startups lately, and it's not uncommon to see, 15 to 18 quarterbacks going off the board in the first two rounds. These guys have longevity. They score more points than any other position, and they don't get injured as frequently as other positions. So I think this is where you can really kind of swing your dynasty leagues. Last year, I know you and I were very high on Jaden Daniels, and we were ahead of consensus on him in dynasty rankings. And looking back at some of the startups I did last year, it's kind of unbelievable that Jaden Daniels was falling into the back of round 2, middle of round 3. And if you picked him, congratulations. Like, you tilted the league in your favor for the next 10 years. That's why you want to hit on these young quarterbacks that can really spike in value.
Hit on the young running backs too. Just hit on all
That
your
too.
players. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just have a good roster. That's the secret to Dynasty. All right, video's over. We'll see you guys next time. All right, let's jump into tier number 1 here. And I don't think any of these names are going to surprise people. At 1, we've got Josh Allen. At 2, Jaden Daniels. And at 3, Lamar Jackson. And Dave, the only dissension that you and I have here is that you have Jaden Daniels at quarterback 1. I've got him at quarterback 3. But when we do this here, this exercise where we put them into tiers, they are all in the same tier for me. And I'm going to use that same typical second year quarterback cop out as I want to see him do it again. We've seen the CJ Stroud stuff before. We've seen the Justin Herbert stuff before. We've seen big rookie quarterback seasons that don't quite keep inflating going into the second season. But everything looks good for Jaden Daniels. They add Deebo Samuel. The offense basically stays intact. They improve the offensive line. So there is a lot to like there. I think a lot of it for me, and this is why we talk about this in terms of dynasty trades, is that mental capacity of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have done it. And they did not slow down. They did not get worse last year. They are still at the top of their game, which is why I still have them at 1 and 2. But Jaden Daniels, Dave, I think almost feels untouchable in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been doing a lot of these startups lately, and I'd say it's kind of 50-50 that I've seen Jaden Daniels go 101 in some and Josh Allen go 1-1 in the other 101 in the others. The reason I prefer Jaden Daniels, no surprise to anybody who's been watching this series, is I am an ageist. I am the Leonardo DiCaprio of dynasty analysts. Like, I do not want these older players, especially when you look at Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. So much of their production comes from rushing, which is great. But heading into their age 28 and age 29 seasons, that is when we start to see that dip a little bit, where Jaden Daniels, still just 24 years old, he'll be 25 by the end of the season, but still has so much room to grow. And that's really what it comes down to. You make the comps to CJ Stroud and his kind of fall off going into year 2. You and I were very in on that fall off. I mean, we were talking about it last year that it was crazy when people were ranking him as the overall QB1 because he's a good quarterback, but he's a good passing quarterback. He doesn't have the rushing upside. Last year, we saw
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels looking like an elite rusher. And something else that excites me about Jaden Daniels is he didn't land in a great situation. Like, we've seen other quarterbacks in this Washington offense, and nobody has elevated Terry McLaurin the way that they did. Nobody scored fantasy points the way that Jaden Daniels did. So I get really excited for the outlook here. I do understand, the sophomore slump that we see often. But I think Jaden Daniels, his rushing upside is so much different than a lot of the other guys that we've seen come out and look good as rookies. Even if he does take a step back as a passer, or defenses figure him out a little bit, I think that rushing upside that he can lean on and legitimately be a threat to rush for 1,000 yards in a season gives him such a high floor and a high ceiling that because of the age, I'm willing to take him in startups ahead of Josh Allen, ahead of Lamar Jackson. And if I've got one of those guys and I could trade back for Jaden Daniels, I'm more than happy to do that too.
So you know what this reminds me of a little bit, and I don't want to be the negative guy here, but I'm remembering Cliff Kingsbury being the head coach of the
Yeah.
Arizona Cardinals and another
Yeah.
young rushing quarterback that was doing so well that he was quarterback one in Dynasty. And I'm talking about Kyler Murray, who we're going to talk about him a little bit later in the show. But everything you're saying is right. A guy like Jaden Daniels is going to have that rushing insulation that is going to give him value no matter what. And I think he remains either in this first tier or even the second tier. The second season here would have to be so disastrous for him to fall out of the top two tiers and not be a top 5 or 6 dynasty quarterback, especially given his age and the production. But that little bit of like, does Cliff Kingsbury end up letting this offense sort of fall off? Because what he has tended to do throughout his career is simplify things for that rookie quarterback so that everything is easy for them year one. I think Jaden Daniels can do it. I think he's a better quarterback than Kyler Murray, but you got to leave that 1%. So that's why I've got him at quarterback 3. I don't think it's all that egregious.
Yeah, and I do understand the Kyler Murray comps. It's funny. Jeff Bell and I on the Dynasty Show, we just had this conversation yesterday. We were doing our NFC West or our NFC East preview, talking about Jaden Daniels, and that was kind of my devil's advocate argument for Jaden Daniels. Is like, well, Cliff Kingsbury, we've seen this happen before, and it certainly can happen. But then I looked at it. I mean, even Kyler Murray, if this is the disappointing low end range of outcomes for Jaden Daniels, you're still getting value. Consistent QB1 production from Kyler Murray, and maybe in hindsight, taking him ahead of Lamar Jackson was silly at the time, but it's not like drafting Kyler Murray at the 101 5 years ago would have just completely tanked your dynasty roster. You're still getting good production from Kyler Murray when he's on the field. I just think that Jaden Daniels, what we saw from him his rookie season, I think he's just a flat out better quarterback than Kyler Murray.
And I would agree. And you know what I think out of this tier, if we're trying to create a value, who's the most valuable player out of this tier, I kind of think it's Lamar at this point, because everyone looks the Josh Allen MVP. Everyone looks the Jaden Daniels shiny new toy. Lamar, it's weird to say that a guy that's in the top tier that I have at 2, you have at 3, is considered undervalued potentially, but he's younger than Josh Allen. He's got all the same rushing upside as Jaden Daniels. And I don't know, did the Ravens get worse in your eyes? Because it seems like the team's still just as good as they were.
Yeah, and I mean, Lamar Jackson has just become such a better player. We talked about that a lot last offseason when we were kind of looking at the second half of the year in this Todd Monken offense. It's like, oh, Lamar Jackson figured it out. Happy learned how to putt, and Lamar learned how to throw. All of a sudden, he became one of the best passing quarterbacks in the league. Still has the rushing upside, and I think you're right. The MVP going to Josh Allen is going to skew some perceptions out there. Lamar Jackson, I mean, he's still a year younger than Josh Allen too. It's really hard for me to rank Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson because the outputs have been so similar over the years. That's very much so like a QB2A, QB2B for me. It's really, really tough for me to rank those guys, but absolutely, I think looking at value, Lamar Jackson is the guy that you want to go out and try to get from this tier.
Do you think maybe there's a Haley Steinfeld effect that's happening with Josh Allen? You may not like him, but you got to respect him.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
By the way, you mentioned the Happy Learned How to Putt. I tried to have my little brother and little sister-in-law, who are 9 and 13, watch Happy Gilmore. Boy, did I forget how that is not suitable for a 9-year-old to watch.
And honestly, Adam Sandler, a lot of his movies didn't age well. My wife and I, like during COVID, you had to find ways to pass the time. And we went through an entire Adam Sandler movie review. And like one of those movies aged well. The Wedding Singer holds up incredibly well. But like you go back and you watch Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore.
The whole time watching Big Daddy.
Movies. Big Daddy's good. Big Daddy was okay.
No, it's still a good movie. But the whole time I'm sitting there now as an adult just like, dude, he's kidnapping this child.
Yeah.
But like when I was a kid, I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. Let him keep the kid. And now as an adult, I'm like, this is awful. What a horrible precedent.
The Wedding Singer aged really well, though. Of all the movies, that's the one that I didn't have the fondest memories of. And then I rewatched it. And I'm like, this is a great movie. And now it's in our rotation.
Yeah.
Enough Adam Sandler talk.
Yeah. No free ads for Happy Gilmore 2 here. Let's go to the second tier. Second tier at number 4, we got Joe Burrow at 5, Jalen Hurts, and at 6, Patrick Mahomes. And Dave, it kind of feels like if we're going to say all of the good rushing insulation things about Jaden Daniels, why are we not giving that same love to Jalen Hurts? And I had that question for myself as I was making these rankings, because you and I both kind of agree. Joe Burrow, so much of his value is tied directly to, is Jamar Chase playing or not, right? And with Jalen Hurts, you do have a lot of that rushing upside still. I think the only thing that worries me a little bit more with Jalen Hurts is that Kellen Moore sort of unlocked that offense a bit more last year. And in doing so, they really heavily committed to the run and Saquon Barkley. And that does not exist in Cincinnati. Also, the Eagles' defense is simply just better. So there's going to be a lot more controlling the ball in Philly, whereas you're going to have a little bit more of that higher pass rate in Cincy with Joe Burrow because that defense, I'm surprised they haven't called you and me to go play.
Yeah, I mean, this, if I'm being honest, is the tier that I'm okay just completely skipping over. I'm
Okay.
in another dynasty startup right now, and this is a money league with some other people. And what we did is rather than just randomizing the draft order, we did the 100-yard dash thing, and then based on where you finish, you were able to pick your picks.
Did you do a
And
100-yard dash?
no, the 100yarddash.com, you put the names in there, and it's just like a
Oh, come on,
randomizer.
guys. Let's get
Yeah,
out there and let's do
I know.
some real work.
I'd have been down for that. But anyway, the first three picks, I forget exactly where I was picking, but 1, 2, and 3 were off the board, and you'd think naturally you'd want to pick the fourth or the fifth or the sixth pick. I ended up purposely taking the ninth pick because I don't want to be in a situation where I feel like I have to draft Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts. By default, you kind of have to put these guys high up in dynasty rankings, but
Mhm.
we've seen the downside case for Patrick Mahomes, and I don't want to, panic on Joe Burrow, but Patrick Mahomes, when he had a prime Travis Kelce and a prime Tyreek Hill, two QB1 finishes, that's great. Now, what we've seen over the last few years without those guys, QB8, QB5, QB12, QB13, he doesn't have that elite rushing upside. That does worry me. And Joe Burrow is a great quarterback. I'm not trying to slander Joe Burrow's name, but let's say Jamar Chase has to miss a year for whatever reason, injury, contract disputes, you name it. I mean, a lot of things can happen. Probably not a contract dispute considering the money that he just got,
Yeah,
but
right.
let's say he has to miss a year. Then all of a sudden, Joe Burrow, we're not looking at him as a top 4, top 5 quarterback. We're looking at him as kind of a low end QB1, very good real life quarterback, but the fantasy production is so reliant on the situation that it makes me a little bit nervous. And then Patrick Mahomes, I already talked about it. Like, we've seen back to back seasons where he's been the QB12 and the QB13. That'll play in super flex leagues. But is that what you want to pay up for in the middle of round one in a startup? Because I don't. So when I'm looking at this tier, talked about the lack of rushing upside for Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. And then Jalen Hurts, just an entirely different story. So much of his value comes from rushing touchdowns. It's not even the rushing yardage like you're getting from Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson. It is touchdowns. He is leading the league in rushing touchdowns since 2021. He's more rushing touchdowns than Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, you name it. Jalen Hurts is leading the league in rushing touchdowns over the last 4 years. And that worries me quite a bit. What happens if Saquon Barkley starts punching those in rather than going down to the 1 yard line? I just see last year, Jalen Hurts was averaging less than 200 passing yards per game, averaging just around 50 rushing yards per game. If those touchdowns don't break in his direction, he's not looking at anywhere near the fantasy finishes we've seen over the last couple of years. And the same reason I don't want to draft touchdown dependent running backs, I don't want to draft a touchdown dependent quarterback. It's all three of these guys, they need to be high up in dynasty rankings, but players I'm okay kind of passing over until we get to the next tier.
So it's interesting because I can see both sides of it. Because yes, you don't want to get have a quarterback that is just consistently touchdown dependent, especially on those rushing touchdowns. But also, like, I don't think that necessarily has to be such a negative. It means that you have a player that has the ability to do that, right? So there is the positive there. I can't remember the stat, and I wish I would have written it down. But from what I remember, the Eagles had the most plays stopped at the 1 yard line out of any NFL team last
Mhm.
year. And so, sure, we take those. Let's say you take a handful of touchdowns away from Jalen Hurts. He's still a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Like, it's not a huge drop off for him. Granted, it does take away some points, but it's not that big of a drop off because he does so much else with his legs that it's not all on the touchdowns. And I think this blends in nicely to what you're saying about Patrick Mahomes and why we have him at 6 is because
I-
after this tier, everyone has a question. Everyone has a question mark, whether it's the offense, the coaching staff, or their own ability. These 6 quarterbacks we've talked about, if you have them in Dynasty, you're good. You're happy with them, and you're likely not trading them.
That's where I'd push back a little bit. If I've got
Okay.
Mahomes, Burrow, or Hurts, I'm definitely trying to trade back into the next tier we're going to talk about, where these guys are all younger. They're all a little bit more mobile. Jalen Hurts, man, it's, I don't want to slander the guy who just came off of a Super Bowl win, but we have seen the NFL, I don't want to say figure him out, but 3 straight years, his per game passing has gone down. And then last year, or I'm sorry, 2 years ago in 2023, he was dealing with a knee injury and saw a huge dip in his per game rushing output. That rebounded a little bit last year, but now they have Saquon Barkley. They don't need him to run quite as much. So 42 rushing yards per game, that's decent, but that doesn't get me overly excited. And when you're comping or coupling that with less than 200 passing yards per game, I mean, he was the QB6 last year, which is good. I mean, that's good. You're getting, top half of the QB1 there,
Mhm.
but you shave 2 or 3 touchdowns off of his total, and then he's a QB8, and you shave 5 touchdowns off his total, and then he's the QB10. So I think it's so propped up by the rushing touchdowns that it does worry me a little bit. I think you're going to look at QB1 production over the next 2 or 3 years, but that could be QB1, it could be QB6, it could be QB12. I think that his output is a little bit more volatile than people realize.
See, what you just showed me is the floor. You shave 5 touchdowns off of him and he's QB10. It's kind of nice to know that I have that floor. I'm okay with that because that floor for Patrick Mahomes is probably closer to like QB 14 or 15. And we saw
Right.
that floor hit so many times. And this next tier, let's get into them because I think the floors here and the volatility here is super shaky. And I think this is where it comes down to how do you play Dynasty? How do you value quarterbacks? Because this tier, Dave, has a lot of the younger guys with some more rushing upside. I think that's going to be a bit of your forte here. So let's jump into this one here. In tier number 3, at quarterback 7, we've got Caleb Williams. At 8, Justin Herbert. At 9, Drake May. At 10, CJ Stroud. 11, Brock Purdy. And at 12, Bo Nix. Now, Dave, not a lot of dissension between us. Maybe the most looks like it's about 2 rankings on some of these guys. Caleb Williams, you have him at 7. Bo Nix, you've got him at 12. I think there are many people that would have looked at last year and said, well, Bo Nix was much better and showed a higher rushing upside and an offense that looks like it also got better too. So why the big disparity when these guys are in the same tier?
Because Bo Nix and Caleb Williams actually had pretty similar seasons. The difference was Bo Nix was able to score more touchdowns than Caleb Williams. And as I say on the show all the time, that's just not something that I like to bet on is people repeating their touchdown production. I mean, if you look last year on a per game basis, we're looking at 25.3 rushing yards per game from Bo Nix, and we're looking at 28.8 from Caleb Williams. So Caleb Williams was actually rushing the ball more on a per game basis. Bo Nix just happened to find the end zone a handful of times. Even the passing output was very similar between the two of them. I'm trying to do all this on the fly right now as we're talking, but yards per game last year, 222 yards per game for Bo Nix. And you look at Caleb Williams, 208 yards per game. So the passing and the rushing yardage was very, very similar. Bo Nix just threw a ton of touchdowns and rushed for a handful of touchdowns. Caleb Williams
Do you
didn't
think
get that same luck.
do you think there's less rushing for Caleb this year in the Ben Johnson offense, who's going to want to get the ball out of his hands quicker and implement a little more play action and pre-snap motion because that's what Ben Johnson has done everywhere. Whereas we might not see as many designed runs for Caleb or as much kind of crazy scrambling. There should be some easy throws for him to make here.
I'd hope so. But Caleb Williams, we did talk about this a lot last offseason, that he does kind of have this untapped rushing upside. He didn't have to
Yeah.
throw the ball much at all at USC, but we said, if he's in a position where his guys aren't getting open or he's scrambling behind an offensive line, he does have athleticism that he didn't have to utilize in college. And we saw that last year. I think you do make a good point that playing under center, a lot more quick reads, probably getting the ball out of his hand a little bit quicker. But when you've got that rushing upside, I don't think he's never going to be a Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels type. But I look at like an early career Patrick Mahomes, a guy who just had a nose for the first down marker, a guy who would just scramble for 8, 10, 12 yards here and there when the team needed it. I can see that. And again, not the super high end range of outcomes, but when I look at two guys that had very similar production in their rookie seasons, I'm going to defer to who I think was the better prospect. I think Caleb Williams is a better prospect than Bo Nix. He's also a few years younger. So I'm still going to prefer Caleb Williams over Bo Nix. And I think that looking at the fantasy output doesn't really tell the whole story for how similar their seasons actually were. And we also have to remember Bo Nix did this with one of the best head coaches in the NFL. Caleb Williams had 3 offensive coordinators last year. It was like a nonstop carousel, and he was just patching together what he could. So, yeah, I prefer Caleb Williams, and I think you did too, right? I think you have Caleb ahead of Bo Nix. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
so you have Caleb at 7, I have him at 8. You have Bo Nix at 12, I've got him at 11. It's gonna sound like I'm bashing Caleb and boosting up Bo Nix,
But we're tight here, yeah.
But like I'm going to be the fulcrum and try to keep it balanced here. Where listen, you can make the argument that Bo Nix was actually doing all this on a worse offense, and it's kind of true. There weren't as many weapons there, and the weapons have improved this year. So if there's a guy I think out of this group in this tier that I'm looking at some of these low, because I don't think anyone's going to trade you Caleb Williams. I don't think anyone's trading you Drake May. Those guys, their values have been skyrocketing this offseason. Maybe you get someone who's panic trading CJ Stroud, but I do think that what's most likely to happen here is you're getting these guys that are towards the bottom of this tier. You're getting the Brock Purdy's and the Bo Nixes because either someone wants to cash out their chips on Bo Nix early, or they want to get rid of the CJ Strouds and Brock Purdy's because they're too boring. And I'm okay making trades for those guys.
And see, CJ Stroud is definitely like I'd kind of lump him in with the tier above. The athleticism is there, but it's just not a part of his game to want to run the ball. Like we never see CJ Stroud rushing.
Yeah.
He can if he wants to, but it's just some quarterbacks are like that. Michael Penix is another guy. The athleticism is there. He just doesn't have it in his head to take off running. So I'd kind of lump CJ Stroud. I wouldn't say he belongs in the tier above with Mahomes and Burrow, but definitely one of those guys that I'm trying to move off of for guys with the rushing upside here. So I know you said a lot of people aren't trying to trade away Caleb Williams and Drake May and Bo Nix. Those guys are definitely spiking in value. But looking at the tier we were talking about before with Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, do you think like a second round pick would be enough for you to trade back? If you've got Mahomes right now and you can trade that for Caleb Williams in a second, I think you'd probably do it. And if you've got Joe
I just
Burrow,
don't think someone's doing that. I think there are going to be a lot of people. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I do believe there's going to be a lot of people that are looking at the Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes quarterback value as being so similar that they're just not trading Caleb away. So if you're telling me that I have to give you Caleb and a second so I can get Mahomes back in return, I don't think I'm doing that. I think that where I start to think about it is if it's Lamar for Caleb in a second. Like that's where
I don't think
and that's not going to happen with people, right? So like that's why I think maybe the guy like to look at here is probably Jalen Hurts. I think that a little bit higher with Hurts, at least perceived value is going to be higher with him, and that's where you can do Jalen Hurts for Drake May in a second or Drake May in a third, whatever it is, depending on what you're looking to get out of there. I don't know, Dave. I just genuinely believe this might be a silly opinion, but I genuinely believe people that have Caleb and Drake are just not going to try to get rid of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the case. I know where I have them. I'm definitely not, but you look at consensus rankings and you look at ADP and you look at all these things and the market does still tend to prefer. Of course, like we're plugged in and we know that you want the younger guys and we want the guys
Right.
with rushing upside, but looking at keep trade cut right now, Joe Burrow is ranked ahead of Jalen Hurts and has a huge gap in value between him and Drake May and him and Caleb Williams. So I think if you could move off of your Joe Burrows and your Jalen Hurts for some of these other guys, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Drake May, I'm definitely trying to do that, even if I'm not getting a ton in return. Like if I can get a second in return, that's great. If I can get a third or another throw-in player, I think I'll probably take that. But I'm definitely trying to move off of Burrow and Mahomes and Hurts where I can.
Man, just looking at keep trade cut right now and the way that Brock Purdy is valued over at quarterback 13 and just
Oh, I shot him way up. I moved him
well,
like 8 spots up my rankings after the contract extension. I'm guessing
yeah.
his value is still going to creep up a little bit.
Like what changed, guys? Is just there's no Debo Samuel there? It's like, is that really what we're worried about? I maybe there's a little bit of being worried about Christian McCaffrey getting older, but we've seen that running backs thrive in that offensive line. I don't know. It seems like it's just a lot of vibes that people don't like around Brock Purdy, but still a valuable quarterback. I think is probably going a little undersold right now.
I think it was the contract. I mean, you can see Keep Trade Cut shows us that 30-day change. He's moved up 7 spots in the last 30 days. And I know
Right.
when Jeff Bell and I, we did a show on quarterback rankings a couple of months ago, and we were pretty low on Brock Purdy. I think I had him at like QB 18 or something like that. As soon as he gets that long-term deal, I moved him inside my top 12 because now we know the security is there. There was fear, as crazy as it sounds. You could just never trust Kyle Shanahan. And like, I had this like thought in the back of my mind, like, he wanted to draft Mac Jones, and now Mac Jones is in San
Oh,
Francisco.
come
What if Mac
on.
Jones beats out Brock Purdy? But Brock Purdy got the contract. We don't have those concerns anymore, and you got to adjust and move him way up the ranks after that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we keep him in that tier. Okay. Let's go to the next tier here. This is going to be tier number 4, quarterbacks 13 through 18. And at 13, you've got Kyler Murray. 14, Trevor Lawrence. At 15, Cam Ward. 16, JJ McCarthy. 17, Jordan Love, and at 18, Michael Penix Jr. And Dave, I think that this tier has the potential to have the most change in value going into next season. I don't know that there is anyone that is currently in this tier that will remain in this tier. I think the one that's actually most likely to remain in this tier is probably Kyler. But everyone else, I think, is either going to be shooting way up or way down out of this tier. And people are going to be making a lot of moves this offseason for these second year guys who are still essentially rookies in JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. For the please eventual breakout Trevor Lawrence and and Jordan Love, I think you can probably put in that same bucket as well. People excited that Matthew Golden is there, and maybe he'll piece it all together the right way. But Cam Ward is the guy in this group that sticks out to me the most. He is the rookie. You and I, this is our biggest disagreement so far in terms of rankings. I don't have Cam Ward low. I've got him at quarterback 18. You've got him at quarterback 13. So in your eyes, would that have necessarily pushed him into the tier above? Do you feel like he's sort of the outlier in this group?
He is, yeah, and I definitely have him in the tier above when I just did my article on Dynasty quarterback tiers. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Cam Ward, JJ McCarthy. I lumped all of those guys together. So I'm
Okay.
have JJ McCarthy in that as well because these are all guys that have athleticism. And JJ McCarthy, we'll see how he bounces back after the knee injury, but he showed some rushing chops at Michigan, and I would expect him to have that there as well. He's also got the benefit of playing with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison
Right.
and TJ Hawkinson and in this Kevin O'Connell system. But Cam Ward specifically, this is one I think the market just has wrong. I just think it's as simple as that. I mean, this guy was drafted number one overall. I think so much of his value being pulled down is because of these reports that we got in January saying, like, oh, well, you'd been like the QB4 or QB5 in last year's class. Last year's class was a historically great quarterback class. I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again in our lifetime. So, yeah, to compare him against that, sure. And if you compare him to the 1983 class with John Elway and all those guys, he would have been the quarterback 4 too. But at the end of the day, the Titans drafted this guy number one overall. They have big plans for him. I saw what Brian Callahan did with a late college breakout player in Joe Burrow and the way that he was able to help develop him. So I have faith in Brian Callahan and his developmental plan. I don't think Cam Ward is as good as Joe Burrow, but I think that we have to have some faith in the system here. And then Cam Ward also has the rushing upside that I like so much in fantasy quarterbacks that I think people don't really realize. Another guy, he's not going to be a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen type of rusher. But if you're looking for that early career Mahomes, the Caleb Williams, the Drake May, where you can expect 30, 40 yards per game, I think that is very much so in his range of outcomes. I think there's this weird thing where everybody has just decided that Cam Ward wasn't worthy of being the number one overall pick and that he's not that good. I have a lot of faith in Cam Ward. I have a lot of faith in Brian Callahan. And I think this is about right, valuing him as a high end QB2. We know that he's going to get 5 years. Like that's almost just guaranteed at this point for a guy drafted number one overall. You look back over the last 30 years, Jamarcus Russell, David Carr were the only guys that weren't really afforded that opportunity. So you're looking at, the opportunity for him to play for the next 5 years. He's got some rushing upside there. Cam Ward is a guy that I would be okay taking in round 3 of a startup. But as I've been doing these, he's been falling to me in the 5th round. And it's just crazy to me that I can get him that cheap.
So then, okay, let me use that logic to ask you some questions here, some this or that in terms of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Because by this logic, yes, he's not the number one overall pick, but wouldn't JJ McCarthy also get another 4 years here of leash on the Vikings? Or do you
I
think he's
mean,
getting maybe one or two?
yeah, I think that he'll probably get extra time, but what we've seen overall now, I don't know if this is a talent thing, is this causation or correlation? That's up for
Mhm.
debate, but we do see that there is a direct correlation between where a player is drafted and how long they start in the NFL. And of course, you have your outliers, your Aaron Rodgers going in the 20s and playing for 15 years and Patrick Mahomes getting drafted at 10 and, being a superstar. We do have those outliers, but more often than not, even the worst case scenarios we can remember for number one overall picks, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, sure, it may have taken them 5, 6 years to find their footing in the NFL, but these are guys now that are giving us consistent QB1 production. And I think that's the same kind of thesis with Cam Ward, even if he is in a bad situation right now, where Calvin Ridley is like the only wide receiver there with a pulse, and we're not too confident about the offensive line and all the other things. He is a good player, and I think that he'll be afforded the opportunity over the next few years to figure it out. JJ McCarthy, maybe gets that same opportunity, but if he struggles this year, struggles again next year, they're probably looking to go somewhere else in year 3. If Cam Ward struggles, I think that, again, I don't know if it's causation or correlation, but we see teams willing to move mountains to bring in former number 1 overall picks as this reclamation project. And that gives me a little bit of faith that Cam Ward's going to get an opportunity to figure it out more than other quarterbacks will.
So we're about right on Cam Ward, by the way. We've got him at quarterback 15 in our consensus, and Keep Trade Cut, a crowdsourced site, has him at quarterback 16. So we're right about where the market is. I'm a little bit lower. I've got him at quarterback 18. And a lot of that for me was simply looking at the quarterbacks that I put ahead of him. I comped Cam Ward to Jordan Love coming out. I see a very similar player. I see him in a worse situation, right? I look at Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy, figure I can put these guys all in the same bucket. I think that the Falcons and Vikings are a better offensive situation than the Titans. I think Cam Ward is good, Dave. And I think you're right. There are a lot of people that have let, I guess, perception become reality with Cam Ward, that he was sort of the boring number 1 overall pick. We all knew he was going to be the number 1 overall pick. All of the discourse was around Shedeur Sanders and all these other players, Ashton Ginty, where I think people just kind of stopped caring. But I think that Cam Ward can still be a good player. The guy who stands out to me
Real
most
quick,
in
can I
this
just
group,
say
yeah,
one thing? And there's not a right or wrong way to play Dynasty. Like, there are so many different philosophies, and I think that's what makes Dynasty so fun.
mhm.
When you talk about situations, and of course, like short term, like, yeah, I'm excited about JJ McCarthy and the players that he gets to play with, but I do play Dynasty in a long term window where I'm
I
playing
know. You
5 to
play it
10
as
years.
yes,
Right. And that's why, like, situations to me don't matter. And I think Trevor Lawrence is a perfect example. You rewind 1 year ago from today. Trevor Lawrence was in a terrible, terrible, terrible situation. He's got an aging Evan Ingram. He's got an aging Christian Kirk. And now you fast forward 1 year, he's got
I don't
Brian
think that was
Thomas Jr., one
terrible.
of the most exciting superstars in the league. He's got Travis Hunter. He's got Liam Cohen. He's got all of these things that we get excited about. And that's it for me, is situations can change in the blink of an eye. So I just want to bet on the player. And right now, Cam Ward's situation probably sucks, if we're being honest. But that can change so quickly. They make a big splashy trade next offseason. They make a big draft pick. They bring in a new sexy head coach. They bring in a wide receiver 1. And all of a sudden it's wheels up for Cam Ward. So I'm just willing to bet on players, knowing that situations are very, very fluid.
I don't know that Trevor Lawrence's situation sucked with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. But yeah, I mean, last year was ended up not being great. I listen. You look at it in a 4 or 5 year window, and you like going younger. I want to be competing every single year, and I'm looking at it in essentially that 1 to 2 year window, because I am a firm believer that dynasty managers are impatient and just go for winning it each year. You can make trades. I firmly believe in my ability to draft rookies. I mean, similar to a lot of the same things that you said, just opposite sides of that coin, opposite ends of that spectrum. And if we are going to talk opposite end of the spectrum here, Dave, in this tier, the guy that you and I seem to just still be way too high on compared to consensus is Kyler Murray. We've got him at the quarterback 13 in our consensus rankings, and the market just keeps him a little bit lower. Quarterback 17. He's dropped 8 spots
That's
recently.
crazy.
What's going on, man? Like, how does he go from being a top 10 dynasty quarterback to nearly being outside of that top 20? There's a lot of discourse that Kyler Murray's just not good at football. And we've seen the memification of Kyler, that he's little and he's playing video games and all that stuff, but he's still got a good scenario there with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Trey McBride. They didn't make a lot of splashy moves in the draft for the offense, but this is still a good player with rushing upside.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it. I mean, since he came into the league, the worst season he's had is 18.1 points per game. Like, that's still top 10 quarterback production. And then we've seen the
Yeah.
ceiling, where he gave us a 25 point per game ceiling. So he's getting a little bit older. And I think that you are so right. Like, the memification and the jokes, and, he's short and he loves video games. And as much as we want to, pretend that everybody is super objective in their analysis, the reality is that these narratives do play into how people rank players and how they perceive players. This is another one that I'll just say I think the market is wrong on. I mean, this guy has been a QB1 basically every single year he has been in the league. And I think the issue is, we saw the ceiling back in 2021 and 2022 when he was churning out these 20 plus point per game seasons, and he hasn't recaptured that. but he's still giving you a safer floor than Mahomes. I mean, like, you're getting a better floor with Kyler Murray than Mahomes, and he's
Yeah.
younger, and he's cheaper. I think this is one where, maybe we got bullied into ranking Mahomes where he is. Like, we didn't want to really just like stand out on an island, but like, I don't think it's that crazy to say that Kyler Murray is inside the top 10 and Mahomes is outside of the top 10 based on what we've seen over the last couple of years. I think with Kyler, it's just somebody who didn't live up to his expectations. And now there have been all these jokes made about him over the last few years, but still a very, very good fantasy quarterback. Now, what it looks like long term, is he still going to be starting 3, 4 years from now? Who knows? But this year, he's probably going to churn out another top 10 season like he always does.
If you're buying into Marvin Harrison hype and you think Trey McBride is a good tight end and you think the Cardinals have improved as a team, you should probably be buying into Kyler Murray. And
I will say
looking at where
Jonathan
the
Gannon
consensus.
The
Yeah.
Jonathan Gannon, Drew Petzing offense isn't fun. I mean, they do really just run the ball a lot, whether it's James Conner, Trey Benson, whatever. I mean, I think that's the difference. When we saw him in this air raid offense, he was giving us 25 points per game. When we see him now in this new offense, 18, but 18 points per game is still very much in play, especially in super flex leagues.
Yeah, but we look at all these other offenses with good quarter. The Baltimore Ravens still
Yeah.
run plenty. The Philadelphia Eagles still run plenty. The Los Angeles Chargers still run plenty. But we're gonna make excuses for those guys because we like them a bit more. Now, granted, they also a lot of those players are giving you much better fantasy production. Some of them are younger, like the Drake Mays. But the Kyler Murray thing is just it's weird to me. And I think having Kyler and Trevor Lawrence and Cam Ward, all these three number one overall picks right next to each other in our rankings, I think is really, really appropriate.
Buying all three of those guys compared to where they're
Yeah.
valued in the market right now.
I love this tier. I love this tier. This is one where I want to buy. And honestly, the next tier is also right in my wheelhouse for tiers and quarterbacks that I'd like to go for. So let's hop into this one. At quarterback 19, Baker Mayfield. At 20, Dak Prescott. 21, Bryce Young. 22, Justin Fields. 23, Jared Goff. 24, Tua Tagovailoa. 25, Sam Darnold. And at 26, Jackson Dart. And Dave, go ahead. You can get on your soapbox. Start talking about Justin Fields because you and I have a 6 ranking disparity in this one. You've got him at quarterback 19. I've got him at quarterback 25. And just to give some clarity on this, keep trade cut. The market has him at quarterback 24. So you are a bit higher on Justin Fields than the market. Talk to us why, because this could actually be a really good buy opportunity for a lot of people.
And I think that's it. I'm trying to buy him because the range of outcomes is so vast. I've talked about this quarterback article that I just wrote. I did every single position, and every single position that I did, there was always one player that I just couldn't fit into a bucket with other players. When I was doing running backs, there were two actually. It was Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. I said I can't really fit these guys in with anybody else. When I did wide receivers, it was Rashee Rice because of the range of outcomes is so wide. Like, is he going to be the top 2 guy he was last year, or is he going to fall by the wayside now with these other weapons there? When I did tight ends, it was Travis Kelce because he's old, but he's still giving us top 5 production. I don't know how to group him in with anybody else. And Justin Fields was another guy that I couldn't group in with anybody else. I think at worst, what you're looking at this year is a top 10 season from Justin Fields. I don't think there's any way that they are going to bench him in lieu of Tyrod Taylor. That's just not going to happen. I think the reason he left Pittsburgh is he has some sort of handshake agreement with Aaron Glenn that he's going to get to start this entire year. Now, that's where it gets interesting is beyond this year. Because if he plays well, they've got a team option to bring him back next year. So then you're looking at 2 years. If he plays well again next year, then he's getting a mega deal to go play somewhere else. And then you're looking at 3, 4, 5 years of elite QB1 production. The downside, of course, is that he doesn't really take that developmental step forward. You're still getting good fantasy production this year, but then the bottom's going to fall out after this season. So there's just such a wide range of outcomes for Justin Fields. And I feel like he kind of falls into a similar position that Anthony Richardson did last year, where we said the upside is through the roof, but the floor is really dangerous. And we saw the floor fall out from under Anthony Richardson. And the same could happen with Justin Fields. But if Justin Fields goes out and wins 10 games, gives us a QB1 finish, and they say, yeah, this is our guy next year too, all of a sudden he's moving up inside the top 8 in dynasty rankings. So when I see a player that's valued this low and has that wide of a range of outcomes, I'm trying to buy him on the chance that he can hit and be one of those guys that gives me production this year and spikes in value for future seasons.
Yeah, I just don't think it's gonna happen. I think he's a fine fantasy quarterback, and he's going to give you the rushing upside. I've been concerned about the Jets offense and the structure of the whole team for the last 4 years, it seems like. And I'm still there. Like I want some better weapons for Justin Fields. I know they grabbed Mason Taylor, but if he's your second best receiving option on the team, I guess you include Brees Hall in that. So, you still have weapons there, but Justin Fields has got to get better at not taking sacks, and that Jets offensive line has struggled over the years. And I know they've put resources to it in the draft, and maybe this is the year it gets fixed. I think that with Aaron Glenn being this defensive-minded head coach and everything he has seen in the NFL and what works for offenses, I think he's going to be committing to the run pretty heavily and rotating all three of those backs through there. So I don't know
Well,
that we
four of
necessarily
those
see this
backs if you
team.
count Justin Fields.
Okay, okay, okay. Who's the
I will
backup
say,
in New York right now?
that's what I'm saying. Tyrod Taylor. So it's going to be Justin Fields. They are not benching Justin Fields for Tyrod Taylor. And you talk about the sacks. Sack rate has gone down for 3 straight years. He had a
Yeah.
career low in sack rate last year. So I think he's just such an intriguing player. Like we know what he did in college, and then it has been a different coaching staff every year in his NFL career since. I can't say for certain that Justin Fields is going to put it all together this year, but on the off chance that he can, I'd prefer him. And when I look at my rankings, the guys that I'm putting Justin Fields ahead of, Baker Mayfield, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa, guys who are probably going to give you decent production this year and probably playing for the next couple of years, but they don't have the same upside. And for me, especially in startups and in trade negotiations, I'm looking for guys that can spike in value. I'm not looking to acquire depreciating assets. And there's nothing Dak Prescott can do and nothing Jared Goff can do to raise their value this year. Drafting Justin Fields, there's still a lot of meat on the bone where, like I said, he can go into that top 8, top 6 dynasty consideration next offseason. I don't think there's any chance that Baker Mayfield, Dak Prescott, or Jared Goff are ever getting there.
I mean, this also kind of just feels like the tier where there's a lot of these players that their values could jump up a lot.
Yeah.
Bryce Young is one of those guys. Not trying to be a homer, but Tua Tagovailoa is one of those guys as long as he's healthy. We've seen how good he can be when the offense is humming and doing what they need to. One of the guys that I think this is going to be interesting because I'm not going to say that he's a value because we don't have him ranked any differently than the market. But Sam Darnold, I think, becomes a really interesting player to look at because I think everyone is looking at last year as a fluke. Everyone is looking at him going to the Seahawks as, well, it's not a good offense. And it's Clint Kubiak who ran the Saints last year, and that wasn't very good. But this is also a reunion of sorts where Sam Darnold has been in this offense, and it's what he succeeds in: play action and pre snap motion. And that's something that I think we could actually see Sam Darnold succeed with Jackson Smith Najigba over here in Seattle. Dave, I think this whole tier is just full of a bunch of good buys, a bunch of cheap buys that aren't going to cost you much. I mean, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Bryce Young, Baker Mayfield, all of these guys. I would start any of them.
Yeah, I think you can kind of split this tier into like two and not draw a line in the tier, but kind of take each player and look at them individually because you do have your productive veterans: Baker Mayfield, Dak
Mhm.
Prescott, Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa, Sam Darnold, and then you've also got the guys that could spike in value: Bryce Young, Justin Fields, and Jackson Dart. And I think that Tua Tagovailoa and Jackson Dart, I think those are the guys that I'd be more inclined to go after just because they could end up being guys that you can get for cheap this offseason that you can fetch multiple first round picks for in the future, or you can stumble into a long term QB1 where I think there is a place for the Baker Mayfields and the Dak Prescotts. Like if you're a QB2 away from being a contender, or if you are a very good contender and you need some extra depth, going out and getting a Baker Mayfield or Dak Prescott or Jared Goff makes sense. But especially in startups, they're just not guys that I'm extremely interested in trying to get.
If you're talking about who from this tier, I think has the biggest jump in value going into next season, I think it's Bryce Young. I
Yeah.
think we're
I'm
talking about
surprised
Bryce
it
Young
hasn't.
next year. Uh, it's actually gone down as of lately. Bryce Young's value. He's now at
Insane.
quarterback 20 on Keep Trade Cut, which is what, like, he is significantly lower than Michael Penix Jr., who is quarterback 19, one spot ahead of him. So it's
QB1
it's
over the final month of the season last year. Like literally the highest scoring quarterback over the final month of the season.
I think there is a high likelihood that Bryce Young is not only a top 15 quarterback next year, but maybe even a top 12 quarterback in Dynasty.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it comes down to the lack of rushing upside. If the touchdowns break in his direction, if he's able to build this connection with Tetaroa McMillan, we see the upside there. But we also the downside with the lack of rushing is something that's a little bit scary. And we saw last year Baker Mayfield, like running red hot, finishes the QB3 in fantasy. You can get that from any of these guys. Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Bryce Young. If they're running hot and throwing touchdowns, they can give you an elite finish. But if the touchdown variance isn't breaking in their direction, then you're looking at more of a middling QB2.
Okay, Dave, now let's go to the final tier that we've got here. This one's just loaded with veterans and rookies and players that are just at a crossroad right now in their career. So at 27, we've got Jalen Milroe. At 28, Tyler Shuck. 29, Anthony Richardson. 30, Geno Smith. 31, Matthew Stafford. 32, Daniel Jones. 33, Aaron Rodgers. 34, Russell Wilson. 35, Malik Willis. And at 36, Joe Milton. And Dave, I think a lot of the guys at the bottom of that tier, we can just kind of let them be. But the players at the top of this tier, specifically those first three, Milroe, Shuck, and Richardson, I think are the ones to talk about the most. And I think a lot of people are really excited about. Let me take that back. I don't think a lot of people are too excited about Milroe and Shuck because of like a lot of the discourse around them. But if you just got them in a rookie draft, you probably got them at a value. So you're probably that one manager that's really excited about having them on your dynasty team.
And I'm a big fan of Jalen Milroe. I talked about it a ton in the pre-draft process. I think that there's a misconception of who he is as a player. I think people think that he is, struggles to read defenses and whatever. I mean, he's a very good rusher, no doubt, but I think he's also a much better processor than people realize. He does have a good deep ball as well. He just needs to work on his touch in the short areas of the field, but I think that he is going to end up starting sooner rather than later. So I'm a big fan of him. And again, I'll go back to this article that I just wrote where I kind of lumped players together. I have a tier of players that I call the arbitrage Justin Fields tier. And inside that tier, it's Jalen Milroe, Anthony Richardson, Malik Willis, and Joe Milton. These are all guys that, when afforded the opportunity, are going to have elite rushing upside. We saw it from Malik Willis last year and had 2 starts on the year, and one of them was a top 6 finish. And we saw Joe Milton when he went out there in week 18, looked like he could be a potential superstar. Now you're getting these guys for super, super cheap, and they might never be season long starters over 17 games. But even if you're just getting the occasional spot start, I kind of look at these guys almost as like handcuff running backs where I can just keep them on my bench. I can get them super late in startups. You can even get them off the bench and off the waiver wire in some dynasty leagues. And on the off chance that Sam Darnold has to miss some games, or Dak Prescott has to miss some games, or Jordan Love has to miss some games, then you're looking at potential elite QB1 upside from these guys in these little spot starts. So I definitely like these guys, even if they aren't ever going to be long-term starters. Shuck also is another guy that I like that I've been targeting in startups because he's going so cheap. Got him in round 14 of a startup, and the path is clear for him to be the week 1 starter for the Saints. Whether he can retain that role long term, I mean, we're going to find out. But another guy who is kind of toolsy, has some scrambling abilities as well. They could pad his floor and elevate his ceiling. So this is another one of those tiers, super cheap. But I am willing to target just about everybody in this tier, especially Daniel Jones, who looks like could be the week 1 starter for the Colts right now. Has some rushing upside that we saw before his ACL tear. These are all guys that are so cheap. I'm willing to draft them here. And this is where last year Sam Darnold probably would have been in this year. And if you were able to get him for cheap in a dynasty startup, which I got him around 24 in a startup last year, and he gave you QB1 production. So this is where you can really strike gold.
Yeah, this is where all the upside is, honestly, with those Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck, yes, Anthony Richardson still. Okay, Daniel Jones. Fine. I'll say it, I guess.
800 rushing yards just 3 years ago. That's pretty darn exciting.
Just 3 years ago. What was America doing 3 years ago, Dave? It's a different world, man.
We
Okay.
saw him start to run a little bit more last year. I mean, Grant, he came back from the ACL, and that's going to zap some
Yeah.
of the rushing. It might just be a Dak Prescott story where he hurts himself and then never runs the ball again. But we did see it early in his career, and we know Shane Steichen. We saw what he did with Jalen Hurts. We saw what he did with Anthony Richardson. If he wants to get him on the move and designing some runs for him, Daniel Jones, really cheap. And you can get him right now. And if he outright wins the job in camp and you're getting 17 games as a starter in Indianapolis, it's not crazy to think you're getting a top 12, top 15 season from Daniel Jones.
It looks like, based on our rankings and where these guys are in the dynasty market, it looks like Tyler Shuck ends up being the best value out of this tier. Because you and I both have him at quarterback 28. We are in lockstep on that. But in the dynasty market on Keep Trade Cut, quarterback 31. I think there's just still a lot of that same memification that happens with Kyler. You get the videos and the
Oh, he's
clips that go
Brandon
around.
Weeden.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, listen, he may not be good. Like, that is something we have to admit. That's why he's ranked this low. There's not many starting rookie quarterbacks that you're going to have ranked this low. So like, there is very much that possibility. He's just not good. But like you mentioned, Dave, and something that I wrote in the scouting report for him in the rookie guide is that he has all of the tools that you want to see out of a top tier quarterback in the NFL. He can do maybe not as well, but a lot of the same things that a Justin Herbert can do out on the football field. He's just not always consistent. So if that's something where you look at this New Orleans Saints team and they say, we're not going to be good anyways, this guy's got the starting job. He's not going to lose that starting job. And he's got a smart offensive minded head coach in Kellen Moore who can put him in the right type of environment. Maybe he gets plenty of time to just get better and better at the game. Granted, I get it. He's going to be 26 years old soon. It's not that great. But guys, we're talking about a 3-year window, 5-year window, whatever it is. Quarterbacks last long in this league, so I'm fine with it.
And I think the fear with Tyler Shuck, of course, is that they get deeper into OTAs and they go, all right, this isn't the guy. We need to make a move for
Right.
Kirk
It could
Cousins,
happen.
or Aaron Rodgers has a change of
Early
mind.
reports is that he's looked good.
It has. And do you know who the number 2 is on the depth chart right now, Alfredo?
Spencer Rattler.
Yeah. I don't think they're going back to Spencer Rattler after what we saw from him last year. And then outside of that, it's Jake Haener. So, I mean, unless they bring in a vet, which I will say, like, you look at the Giants right now with Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Jackson Dart, they might move one of those guys. And I think if Russell Wilson or maybe a reunion with Jameis Winston, if he goes into New Orleans, that muddies the waters a little bit. So I think that's the fear and the trepidation with Tyler Shuck is that they add a veteran. But if they go into the season as is, we're probably getting 17 games of Tyler Shuck.
Gosh, you just going through that list of Saints quarterbacks. Do you remember when Ian Book started for the Saints? I watched that Saints Dolphins, man. I watched that. It was so sad that his family was there and they just kept panning to the family. Not great. Not great.
Yeah, I think the only start I could remember worse than that. I mean, there was that one, what was it, a couple of years ago during the COVID year where the Broncos had to pull in like a practice squad wide receiver to be their quarterback.
Kendall Hinton.
Yes,
who came
yes.
in.
I think that was the worst quarterback performance I've ever seen. But that Ian Book one is up there with do you remember Nathan Peterman? Was it 6 interceptions?
Nathan Peterman, 6 interceptions. The GOAT, Nathan Peterman. Yeah. My group chat of college friends still calls him the GOAT.
Yeah, I mean, you always feel bad for those guys when, like, you watch the first series and you're like, oh no, this guy's in way over his head. And then he's just going to take a beating for the next 48 minutes.
Not great. Not great. But hopefully this was great for everybody. I think it's going to be a wrap for us. We went through, Dave, 36 quarterbacks. That's some good value, if I say so myself, on this video here for everybody. And we're going to be back again next Monday as well, or excuse me, next Tuesday as well. And we're going to be doing that all throughout this off season here, coming back to you guys every Tuesday. And as we get closer to the fantasy season, we'll ramp up to 2 episodes a week and 3 and 4. And we're going to get back to that normal regular season schedule. But you know what, guys? Enjoy the off season. Go touch some grass, then come back here once a week to watch or listen to the episodes. We're done with Dynasty. We are moving on to redraft. It's exciting. We're closing that Dynasty chapter, moving on to some new stuff here. As always, I want to thank everybody for watching or listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.